Okay, round 2. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Ah, sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right, ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
We make this.
Hello everyone and welcome back to We Are Starfleet, a Star Trek, Discovery and now Strange New Worlds podcast on the We Made This podcast network. I am your guest host this week, Tony Black, and we continue our coverage of the first season of Star Trek Strange New Worlds by discussing episode 4, Memento Mori. In this episode, written by Davey Perez and Bo DeMaio and directed by Dan Liu, the Enterprise is responding to a call to deliver some atmospheric processors to the planet Finibus 3 when they find a colony that has turned into a bloody massacre. It's a bloody massacre down there.
Captain, we appear to have a bloody massacre down there.
It's a bloody massacre down there, Captain. And the crew of the Enterprise find on the planet a massacre of a colony before security officer Lan Noonien Singh begins to suspect that her old enemy, the Gorn, have returned. And my guest to join me for this episode discussing Strange New Worlds for the first time is regular co-host on various different podcasts on the We Made This network, including our comedy one you have been watching. It is Robert Turnbull. Rob, welcome to We Are Starfleet.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm a bit disappointed. I felt like I really wanted to have the sound of a transporter, cue me in. I wanted to be I'd welcome aboard. Here is Robert Turnbull. I would I'll just imagine that in your heads. That's what happened.
Well,
hello,
maybe the power of editing will mean that you have beamed in. And what rank would you like, given you're aboard the Enterprise? What rank would
Enterprise?
you be?
Oh, I mean, I guess. Well, if it's the Enterprise, I'll go for Lieutenant.
Okay.
I don't want to be a Badmiral, so. And let Pike have a run at being captain for a while. So I'll go for a lieutenant for now. No, lieutenant commander.
I was going to say that's always struck me as quite a good one, lieutenant commander. You haven't got too much responsibility, but you can pull your weight a bit on ship.
Yeah, it's like being in middle management, isn't it?
Yeah,
you don't have to stay late.
Yeah, exactly.
But you get to decide the schedule.
Yeah, okay, Lieutenant Commander Turnbull. So I'm definitely going to be a Badmiral. I like that. I want to be.
Oh, you're Badmiral.
Yeah.
Shocking.
My surname's Black. Badmiral Black.
Oh, well, that gives it away, doesn't it? Yeah, here comes Badmiral Black. I won't do it. I won't leave the colonists. We have a duty of care to the Prime Directive. And now you have to tell me to do it anyway.
Yeah,
and I'll go against your orders.
You're gonna go against the top brass. But anyway, yeah, we're talking about Star Trek. This is my second time on We Are Starfleet after covering the pilot episode with Craig and Ashley, who have been hosting the last couple of weeks and doing a tremendous job. And they will be back in a few weeks themselves. But Rob, you've popped up on our Make It So, our Star Trek Picard podcast recently, talking about the second season of Star Trek Picard, and now we're into this whole new show, aren't we? So we've watched the first 4 episodes, obviously. We're going to talk about the 4th one today. Why don't we talk about general thoughts then, overall, for both of us, about how we think the season's going so far? We're almost at the halfway point. Next week we'll be there. So how are you enjoying Strange New World so far? That's not the most confident of noises. I won't lie.
I don't love it,
okay,
but I think it's okay. I'm kind of enjoying it. And you know what? I mean, as we're going to discuss this episode in particular, I'm sure I will touch on the points of why this is generally my feeling for the whole show so far. And let's be fair, it is only 4 episodes in. We all kind of like joke about the fact that TNG didn't get good until Riker had his beard. It doesn't get really good until you hit the 3rd season. So, you know, it's like, it's not always fair to judge shows from like episode 1 and 2. I think it's fine. I think it's okay. I'm enjoying it. I have enjoyed the 4 episodes that I've watched so far. I don't think it's never going to be my favourite Star Trek series, that's for sure. You know, even if it improves a great deal. But it's okay. It's all right. I'm liking it. I think we're in a weird place with Star Trek at the moment where I feel like, and this is not to discredit anybody who's loving this show or loving any of the other shows, but I think we're in a weird place where for so long Star Trek was so shit that basically anything that comes along which is even vaguely not shit, we kind of jump on it and we're like, oh, this is amazing. I love it. This is the new birth of Star Trek. So, you know, it's like for a little while, it felt like Lower Decks was like, oh, Lower Decks is real Star Trek finally. But it's not really. It's okay, but it's not really. Star Trek Picard, you know, a lot of people didn't enjoy the first season. First 2 or 3 episodes of the second season, everyone's kind of like, oh, wait a minute. I feel like Star Trek is back. And then, of course, it kind of, you know, lost its way a lot in that show. And then this comes along and, you know, you get the opening speech at the beginning of the titles and everyone goes, finally, Star Trek is back. And then I've kind of watched a few episodes and I'm like, is it? I don't know. So jury's still out for me in a big way on this. It's fine. It's okay. I don't like the titles, by the way.
You're not a fan.
Just to throw that out there. I think I'm still waiting for a good modern Star Trek title sequence. Lower Decks is the only one doing a decent job.
Yeah, that's quite fun, isn't it? Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I'm more broadly positive about Strange New Worlds than you at this stage. I think I really, really, really liked the pilot episode, you know, the first one. It really hit the ground running for me. And I think I'm just enjoying the fact that it's, well, for one thing, it's relatively standalone storytelling, you know, and that feels such a treasure right now, you know, and they've so far they've really stuck to their word in that they said it will be much more standalone. It will be in the vein of the original series in that style of way, or the other 90s TV shows. And for the most part, I think that's true. I think, you know, if you look at all 4 of these episodes, it's not a serialized story by any means, you know, and they are doing the traditional Star Trek idea of giving each character a focus. You know, episode 2 we had Uhura. Yeah. Episode 3 it was Una. Now in this one it's La'an. In the next episode, without spoiling much, it appears to be Spock. So I think that's great. You know, I think that's in the best traditions of Star Trek of old. And, you know, I've talked at length on previous We Made This shows about my issues with certain other things, my issues with Discovery, some of my issues with Picard and the way they tell stories, both of which have huge fandoms, you know, and people who love them, and that's fantastic. And I've genuinely always been very pleased for those kind of people. I can't get there with those shows, particularly Discovery, but and that's probably why I've never been on We Are Starfleet properly before we're talking about Strange New Worlds, because I don't have a massive amount of positivity to say. But if I'm honest, however, I think it's great that people love that, and, you know, all power to them. I think with this, I don't love it, you know, but I do think that in terms of the cast and in terms of the setup, which is as classic Star Trek as you can possibly get, really, with a modern sheen, I'm more engaged than I have been in quite a while. I do think we might have the best collection of characters, maybe even the best cast Star Trek show since Voyager. You know, for all Voyager's faults, it did have a good cast of characters, I think, and it did have engaging people playing those parts.
But Voyager's faults, of course, being Chakotay.
yeah, so you take Chakotay out of the equation. But it really does have, I mean, it helps a little bit that quite a few of these characters are of the 60s, so they already have a real established precedent. But, you know, quite a few of them are really being characterized properly for the first time. And, you know, I'd argue that Uhura never really had a vast amount of characterization in the original series, as iconic as Nichelle Nichols was. And Celia Rose Goodin, who plays Uhura in this show, has really impressed me so far. I think she's a really good actor.
Yeah.
She's a really good actor, yeah. And she's doing great work. Similarly, Jess Bush as Chapel, Christine Chapel, again, had scant characterization in the 60s, and she's already...
We'll get into it. I have so much to say about Jess Bush. It's like there's stuff going on there.
Yeah, she's great, definitely. And so, you have quite a few characters here who have existed for 60 years, near enough, but there is room to do stuff with them. And I think, and obviously you can say that about Pike as well. But then even the other characters, the new characters, are interesting. Well cast, been so far well performed. So even though I would say, and like we say, it is early days, I don't think any of these 4 episodes have been gold standard classic Star Trek as such. But I think they are perfectly solid. And I would include this one that we're going to talk about today in that. And that's nice. That is nice to have, because it's felt so up and down in the last 5 years. So hit and miss. So occasional highs and lots of lows. That to get a show that is pretty consistently decent and good and has a lot of room to grow, I think, is lovely. And I am enjoying this so far more than I have enjoyed any Star Trek, I think, consistently since the first season of Discovery, which I maintain is excellent for the most part. So, yeah, broadly a little bit more positive, Rob.
I actually, like, all joking aside, he said ... with quotation marks. I actually agree with everything that you just said there. I think you especially in terms of the characters and the cast, I think is bang on. There's one character I'll get to in the context of this that I'm not so keen on, but generally speaking, I think the cast are exceptional. I think that the characters and the mix of characters they've got are great. And like you say, we've got some previous characters. Basically, we've got Majel Barrett's backlog of characters getting some boost to them, which I think is fantastic. And I do agree with that. The first episode felt like a statement of intent. The first episode is almost pastiche of Star Trek. And I don't say that as a criticism, but it's not necessarily a compliment. But I think that first episode was very, very statement of intent. But it's still, there's almost a little something missing there for me. But you know what? Rather than like waffle on about the pros and cons right here and now, I'll kind of address some of that, because this episode actually affords me good opportunity to address what I do and don't like about it overall, because it's quite a nice episode in that way.
Yeah. Well, that's a perfect segue, Rob. It's almost like we know what we're doing here. So
it's almost like we know what we're doing.
Almost.
It's a bit like this show of Star Trek, isn't it? It's almost like they know what they're doing.
Well, yeah. So if we're looking at Memento Mori then, what overall did you make of this 4th episode, and what would you give it out of 10 as a rating?
Okay, if I'm comparing it to the other episodes in this series, and there have only been 4, and we're still getting to know everybody, I'd probably put it at maybe an 8 compared to the other episodes. Maybe an 8. I think I probably liked some other episodes a little bit more, but some a little bit less. If I'm comparing it to Star Trek as a whole, and there's a shit ton to compare it to, it probably drops down more to a sort of a 4 or a 5.
So what are the general pros and cons for you of this one?
Well, I think we've sort of talked about very briefly already the fact that the show is very much giving us an episode focusing on each character to get an idea, to get to grips with them. And this one obviously is Lan, and it's a nice study of who she is, but we don't lose sight of the other characters. We get sort of Hema and Uhura get a little bit of stuff. Even sort of like, Una and the medical team, they get a little bit of stuff. So we don't lose anybody whilst it's mostly focused on her, which I think is a testament to the episode. I think it does that really well, which I think the previous episodes have done well. Their ability to sort of interweave the A plots and the B plots into one whole is very reminiscent of older Star Trek. The difficult thing for me with this one is that we're kind of talking about how good this show is and how it's sort of like the positives of this show overall is how it's kind of harking back to what Star Trek was. And I think, I'm assuming everyone has seen the first episode in particular. That's such a Star Trek episode, First Contact, Prime Directive, all of that stuff comes into play. And it's very, very Star Trek-y, almost by the book, but that's what you needed. This episode is also very by the book. God damn it. But this episode is also very Star Trek-y, but it's probably the first one in this season so far that actually feels really derivative, which is kind of a downside for me. Because you do kind of watch it, and there are moments where you're like, oh, well, we're watching The Wrath of Khan. And it's like,
I did
they kind of did The Wrath of Khan,
yeah.
and then they did it again in Nemesis. And it's like, actually, it's very, very... It stops being sort of generically Star Trek and becomes a little bit too much of the, the submarines with spaceships. So that's kind of the problem for me, I think. And also it's like the people separated out, there's the classic episode where Worf has to deliver Miles and Keiko's baby, and it's like, that's another similar episode in TNG where the captain, he's stuck in a turbo lift with some kids and everyone's separated off, and suddenly this episode starts to feel like a retread of previous episodes, but not as generically as the last 3 episodes. I think the last 3 stories that they've done have been very Star Trek-y, whereas this actually feels a little bit cut and paste of other Star Trek episodes. There's a mind meld in the middle of it, which is effective in terms of progressing a character, but still I felt like suddenly I was watching Voyager when that was happening. So it's a weird one, this. I kind of enjoyed it, but it felt a bit more pedestrian.
Yeah, it's a funny one because it's a little bit more of a hodgepodge. I do agree with that, really. I think that the previous ones have had a little bit more of a traditional, kind of classic Star Trek idea of you have the virus episode, or you have the rescue the planet episode, and you arc a character around that. Whereas this one is, I guess you could liken it to some of the episodes maybe of TOS, like where they didn't really see the Romulans, and they were quite shadowy, or episodes of Enterprise where they didn't quite see certain races. Again, it might have been the Romulans. I think I think there were 1 or 2 other races in Enterprise where they would have encounters with their ships, but they wouldn't quite, encounter the aliens themselves. Yeah. Now, I mean, the Gorn in this, and we'll talk more about the Gorn later, but the Gorn are obviously famous for Arena, aren't they, in TOS, which is where Kirk fights the big monster thing. But obviously we don't see them in that way in this episode. We just see the ship. Now, there's every likelihood that we'll probably see the Gorn themselves later on at some point. But in that sense, I suppose it's kind of brewing all of these different things together and laying a bit of track. I think if there's been an episode yet that's laying a bit of track for stuff to come later, I think it is this one. But with La'an, with the Gorn, who I think are going to come back, maybe even in the finale. It feels like they're setting the Gorn up as a potential, threat enemy that they want to explore here. So this one is maybe doing that a little bit more than the other episodes that are more driven around a particular character. The last episode was very Una, very much about the Illyrians and her revelation there. The previous one was very much about Uhura deciding that she wants to be where she is. So this one is ostensibly a La'an episode, but at the same time, there's a lot of other stuff going on, like you said. A lot of other things. There's various different subplots happening at the same time in a different way to the previous 2 or 3 episodes. So I think I'd go generally for about a 7.5. Between a 7 and a 7.5 here. I think it's maybe the second or third best episode since the pilot. So, broadly positive, but I agree with your points overall.
Yeah, and I think it's like you say, it does feel like it's setting stuff up. It's a little bit of a chess move episode, which is not a bad thing, and I think it does it relatively well, and it does, it still stays true to being a character piece. But yeah, you do. I mean, I really like what they're kind of doing with the Gorn. Sort of setting the Gorn up as villains. I feel like they're going to be the villains, if not of this season, then perhaps of the show. And they're not seeing them. They're not looking, because obviously Gorn, they're a little bit funny. They're a bit goofy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's brilliant. You know, the original appearance of the Gorn and Shatner's, you know, ripped shirt and, you know, two fist punch and all that kind of stuff. I love it. But even now, we're both having a chuckle about it. And they kind of, you know, and they brought the Gorn back in Enterprise, and they tried to make them a little bit more formidable, and the effects they had at the time didn't quite work. I'm quite comfortable that this show, with its crazy budget and modern special effects, can present us with a truly terrifying Gorn, which I think is why we've not seen them. I think we will see them.
Yeah.
And I think they're playing up to the fact that it's quite a nice technique. It's a little bit like when Russell T Davies brought the Daleks back in Doctor Who. Rather than just coming and saying, here are the Daleks, they're big baddies, there was a real build-up, a real sort of sense of teaching the audience, which I think is quite nice. And I think I really like that they're doing that here. They're kind of teaching the audience to find the Gorn scary, because that's the guy in the rubber mask. And then when they do present them to us, which I'm sure they will, if not at the end of this season, then maybe the next season, when they do present them to us, we can already be scared of them. We can have been told that they're formidable.
Yeah.
So I think that's a real asset to the episode.
No, I agree. And I think there's also the factor that they can't necessarily assume everyone watching this has seen the original series. I mean, there are people on the We Made This Discord who watch all the modern Star Trek, have watched all the 90s Star Trek, and some of them haven't even seen TOS, you know, even to this day. So
those bastards.
How dare they? But it's there's no guarantee that people will necessarily.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from, with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Know much about the Gorn. You know, they're not outside of Star Trek sort of lore. They're nowhere near as well known as the Klingons or the Romulans or even maybe the Borg, you know. So they are
No, exactly.
They're quite deep cut villains. So to actually put the focus on them and in the 60s, obviously, they didn't have the budget or anything to make the Gorn anywhere near scary. Although, you know, a bit like how the Daleks, when you look at them, are hilarious. You know, these big teapots with plunge, you know, these walking like salt shakers with plungers on them. But in the 60s, they were scary to kids. And I think, you know, you could have found maybe that the Gorn back then, to younger audiences, that creature might have been a bit scary for children. So it's all about reconceptualizing these ideas, I suppose, that are kitsch now, but you can bring them back in a modern way.
That's exactly it. And I think I admire the show for doing that, because it's almost like they're reclaiming it. And some of my faults and some of my flaws with this show, not to digress too much, is that I don't feel like they've thrown off the shackles of embarrassment that the Kurtzman era has. I still feel like this show is ever so slightly embarrassed about being Star Trek, which is one of the things holding me back from really loving it. But I do like the fact that they're embracing probably the kitschiest, because you're right. I think most people, even if they don't watch Star Trek, and I joke about, you know, not watching TOS, but it is, you know, it's a long time ago. It's the 60s. You know, I grew up watching it as a kid, and then was very excited when Next Generation started. But then you only have to be a little bit younger than me, and Next Generation was the first show you got into. And then you only have to be a little bit younger than that, and then maybe Voyager or Enterprise, or maybe you didn't watch it at all until Discovery came along. So it's not unreasonable that people don't know the original series, which is the sandbox that this show is now playing in. And I think the thing about what you say is, like, people still know the Klingons and Vulcans, even if they've never watched Star Trek. That's kind of in the consciousness. the same way that, you know, Yoda is in the consciousness. You may not have watched Star Wars, but you know who Yoda is, more or less. But I think, weirdly, the Gorn, there are probably people who have never watched Star Trek who have watched Family Guy and seen a funny skit with the Gorn. There are people who have never watched Star Trek who will have watched Big Bang Theory, where they do funny things about the Gorn attacking. So I think you're right. The Gorn are not in the public consciousness the same way that the Klingons are as Captain Kirk's number one villain. But I think there are going to be people out there who know them as a silly thing. So I do actually really like the fact that they're reclaiming the Gorn in this. And the only way I will have, if they bring them back and they put them on screen and they've got some amazing CG prosthetic thing going on, that'll be fantastic. But if they put them on screen and it's that guy in the mask, then this might become my new favourite Star Trek.
Well, you know what? You've hit on a good point here. That really, Star Trek, and I mean this in the nicest possible way to anyone listening, Star Trek's not supposed to be cool. When we were at school, if you told anyone that you were a fan of, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, but the honest truth was, if you told anyone when we were at school in the 90s that you were a fan of Star Trek, you would have been consigned to the nerd corner of the classroom, right? And you weren't. It was not so. And the same was the same with Doctor Who, right? Now I know the geek has inherited the earth quite rightly, and geek culture is everywhere now, and with the internet and the online world, that's great.
But we still have to justify it all the time. That's the only problem. Like, the geeks have inherited the earth, but people still keep saying, "Yeah, but why?" It's like,
yeah, I know. And what frustrates me is that, if anything, fans of football, whether it be British, you know, like European or whatever, soccer, if you like, not that that's a real word, but there you go, or American football, all these things, or any significant sport, like, they are, if anything, even greater nerds for what they love than anyone.
God,
I mean, they are
the
biggest nerds in the world, yet they don't have any of the kind of social stigma that someone in a school or anywhere in life would have had if you said, "I love Star Trek." Even so, this isn't me saying that's a good thing, but what I'm saying is that Star Trek is at its best in a way when it just is. It doesn't try to be anything other than a nerdy pursuit, if you like. It's not supposed to be, you know, when J.J. Abrams brings it back in 2009, as enjoyable particularly as that first film is, you know, it's all swaggering and sexy and cool, and it's a bit like, that's not really what Star Trek at its best is where you've got, you know, someone like a pasty-faced android, you know, describing in technical terms the rotation of a binary star. You know, it's like, and there was a little bit of that in this episode. You know, there was a little bit of them talking about, you know, coasting the wave of a Coriolis force and this kind of thing. I was a bit like, yeah, this is good. This is nerdy, you know, and I think that's, so I think that's a good thing. I think Star Trek needs to stop being embarrassed about itself and just accept the fact that it's never going to be. And it's also we're getting slightly off topic here, but this also ties into the whole, you know, when Paramount or whoever are chasing this $1 billion Star Trek box office for a movie, they are living in cloud fucking cuckoo land, because it's never going to happen. You know, you're not going to get that audience turn up for Star Trek at a movie. You know, so they need to stop trying to be Star Wars or James Bond or Marvel, and just accept that it's a cool, it's a fun, niche, nerdy thing. And if anything, that's why I am leaning toward Strange New Worlds being my favourite new show of Star Trek since it came back. Maybe my favourite show. Dare I say it? And this is early days, but I'm going to put this out there right now. This might end up being my favourite Star Trek show since Deep Space Nine. And the reason for that is that it might well just accept the fact that it is what it is, you know, and it plays into that. And I really, really hope it does.
That is a bold statement. I hope for your sake as a fan, and also my sake as a fan, that you're kind of right.
To be fair though, Rob, the bar's pretty low. Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Picard.
Whoa. it's
now, come not a high bar. Come on.
Did Tuvix die for nothing? Come on, give Voyager its credit. And I'm a secret Enterprise fan. No, you know what? I fucking I love it. No, I kind of agree with you a lot, but I I'm not necessarily convinced that the show is as sort of dedicated to that nerdiness as you do. So for me, there's kind of a disconnect that I felt with this episode in particular, and I think it kind of speaks to the series. So everything you're saying about it being nerdy, and there is a lot of that in this, and I love it. I love it. I love that Spock says sensors so many times in this episode. And every time I hear Spock say sensors, I love it. There's a little part of me like, I'm just suddenly back watching TOS again. And there is some of that techno babble going on. They do my absolute favourite thing where they explain something complicated and then they give it a very simple explanation afterwards, which is my all-time favourite Star Trek thing.
That's good.
It's for me, it's the... I'm sure most people, if you're a Star Trek fan, you've watched Futurama, and they do the perfect example of that where they give a very, very long explanation of how to reroute some power and explode a ship. And then Bender just says, like putting too much air in a balloon. And that's become that's my go-to. So if I'm watching Star Trek and they do the long techno-babble explanation and somebody else then gives the simple... In this, I think it's something about a compass, turning sensors into a compass. I'm just like, like putting too much air into a balloon. I love that. And I think this episode does embrace that a lot. But I also think that it's still trying a little bit hard to be cool. I think it can't quite let go of that. And where that really shows for me, and I know I'm sort of talking, sort of like jumping around in terms of characters and moments and stuff, and I'll try and focus back down in a second. But so the character of Ortega is a character that I massively dislike in this show. Cannot stand that character. Bearing in mind, 4 episodes in, a lot can change. I know, I realise that. But because I'm liking all the other characters. But I can't stand that character. And it's mostly because they're just sat there. They never shut up. They're just sat there with all this inane, supposed to be funny, jibber-jabber, sassy talk. It's just really irritating. And that's kind of where I'm finding the disconnect with this show, because I feel like it's actually quite somber. It's quite portentous. It's not as dark or miserable or pretentious as Discovery is. You know, Discovery is just so void of joy. This show is not like that, but it's still a little bit serious. It's a little bit serious. You know, Pike keeps thinking about his future accident. All of the episodes tend to end on a bit of a downer. Like none of these episodes so far have ended with the characters stood on the bridge having a laugh. They basically all end on slightly down notes. And I feel like the show is trying a little bit too hard still to be grown up and serious in that way that all the Kurtzman shows are. But they know that they want to be fun and jolly and light-hearted. So they just keep giving characters inane dialogue. Uhura has some irritating lines in this episode, and Ortega in particular just constantly, she just doesn't shut up. And it's really irritating. And I found it irritating when Geordi did it, when he was helmsman in the first series of TNG. I used to find it irritating when Paris would do it. And now I'm finding it irritating with Ortega. So it's a real good example for me of the something not quite gelling in this show. I feel like the levity is still a bit forced. And so I'm maybe not finding the show as fun as I should, because I think it's trying to lean into the geekiness that you're talking about, and I think maybe it wants to, but I think somewhere somebody is just still trying to be a bit cool with it, and I haven't been able to embrace what they're presenting to me yet.
No, fair enough. I think those are good points. Definitely, I think it. I can see where you're coming from with that. I kind of agree in some ways. I think I like Ortega's a bit more than you do, more than I probably thought I would actually going in, because I'm not a big fan of that kind of template of a character either. But you know, I find her relatively, you know, entertaining. I mean, I quite liked when she says "full impulse to a giant gas cloud of death." Why not? You know, it's that kind of slightly second.
Oh, you see
that was funny.
That was the line where I was just like, "Oh, fuck her." Put her in an airlock. It's
But
just,
this is,
it's just a bit
but
too
that's
much.
That's fair enough, yeah. And it just depends. But I think you're right about the point of it being quite sad in some ways. This show, in a way, there is a lot of
I think that's a nice
sadness.
way of saying it. Yeah,
and it stems from the fact, and I remember saying this right after such sweet sorrow, and that end of Discovery season 2, where Pike had discovered, when we found out Pike knew about his future to come. I remember saying at the time, how are they going to make a spin-off show about a captain who knows he's going to die and become Davros? How does that happen? Like, do you know what I mean? It's like, and the pilot handled that very well, basically. The pilot essentially tried to deal with it and send him off. However, it hasn't really left that behind. It's sort of still lingering with Pike. There's still those, moments where he remembers he's got 10 years to live, and I still keep thinking about how Craig Mackenzie, in the discussion we had, framed it as like we're living with a terminal illness. And I think that's a great allegory for this, actually. I think that's really good in a way to approach what they're doing with this. But that's a really sad way to begin a show that is ostensibly the most dialed in Star Trek idea, the Enterprise, New Worlds, So it's interesting because I think that there is the capacity for this, but the characters, and maybe this is part of the storytelling, that maybe these characters are going to lighten up as the time goes on and going to get a bit freer of their burdens, maybe, and we're going to see some of them thaw and develop and gel. And I hope that happens. I really do, because I think the cast already have the charisma to pull that off. There are plenty of comical moments, much as I do think Ethan Peck is a bit wooden as Spock at times, and I don't think he's got anywhere near the charisma of Leonard Nimoy, and to some degree not even Zachary Quinto either. I don't think he's quite as good as either of those two, but
controversial.
I don't think he is. I think he's a bit wooden sometimes, but he nailed a cracker in this episode where they're talking about not of needing to go deeper into the brown dwarf. And somebody just sums it up like, oh, we need to go into this brown dwarf. And Spock just goes, that is not what I suggested. And it was really funny because he nailed that. So I'm hoping he can grow into that a bit more and nail that sort of. So there were absolutely funny lines in this, and there were things that made me chuckle. And I think, but they do generally need, I mean, I suppose this episode particularly is quite dark, really, because it's a crisis episode. It's like you described the episode with of TNG earlier. I think that's Disaster, isn't it? The one you mentioned earlier, where Keiko gives birth and Worf has to help her deliver. Is that Disaster, where the ship's in trouble?
I think it is. I'm as a huge Star Trek nerd years ago, I made a decision to try and not memorize titles and just humorously refer to them as the one where Worf is not a merry man, the one where Riker has a birthday party. It's kind of it's my fight against being a true nerd.
It's like
even though deep down inside I secretly know what they're all called.
You know what they're all called. It's the Friends version of Star Trek, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got
the one with the 4 lights, that kind of thing.
Yeah, the one where Picard wakes up in bed with Q. It's like Tapestry. You secretly know what they all are.
You need to write all these out.
I can't remember what they're called. There are so many episodes. God, I'm not a nerd, guys.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. The one where Worf delivers the baby.
The one where Worf delivers the baby. Yeah. And even though it's not exactly the same kind of story, it is a shipping crisis episode, and it's the first one that they've done in that way, where the Enterprise is. It is that blend of Wrath of Khan, because you've got them going into this dwarf, and you've got the submarine style blips on the radar and all that kind of stuff, and then you've got engineering in trouble and the stuff going on in sick bay. So it has that crisis element to it, this episode, and by the nature of that. All the way through, I kept feeling like somebody was going to die, somebody of import. I kept thinking, are they going to kill off Hemmer at the end of this? Because he obviously has that injury. And he's not a legacy character who we know of. He's a really good character. He's the Anar
I really like him,
engineer.
Yeah.
He's great. He's proper cranky. But he's good at what he does, in a different way to sort of Scotty would be. And it's a great little callback to Enterprise, because obviously they were introduced in Enterprise, but they were like the Andorian sort of shoot-off kind of race, weren't they, the Anar? But it's like, but I kept thinking, are they going to kill him? Because there was all the stuff through this episode about Pike saying how, we don't want to lose anyone, and, You know, the episode is called Memento Mori for a start. You know, so there's lots of, but they didn't do that in the end.
Well,
there were crew members who died, but it wasn't.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's the first episode where we get an on-screen death. Because I think I counted. There's something like about 9 number, sort of maybe 7 or 8 crew, and about 3 or 4 civilians die. I think. And I think it is the first on-screen crew death we've had in this series.
But it's not and this is where modern, and this is not just Star Trek, but modern television drives me bonkers sometimes, because you know, you sometimes want them to kill somebody to make something really land. You know, I mean, I use the Discovery example that I really still think that Tilly should have died at the end of Kobayashi Maru at the start of season 1. I think it was season 4. It was primed and ready for that to happen, and for it to really push that season into an arc it needed to go for Burnham, and they didn't do it, and I was really surprised. I mean, I was like, sure, this is surely going to happen, and it didn't. And I think, you know, that happens a lot in television, where they get to a point where you think they're going to do something that's quite bold. And I think, much as it would have been a shame to lose him, I think killing Hemmer here would have been a bold way to underline what the episode was partly talking about. The idea, you know, Memento Mori is Latin for remember that you die, or in brackets have to die. And all the way through, there is that, and this tracks with the general arc of the show, as we've talked about, this theme of sadness and the onset of death. You know, as we're seeing with this idea that they're playing with Pike, it's really grim. And this is where the show has gone.
Star Trek's fun again. Thanks, Strange New Worlds.
I know, and it's surprising. It is surprising, because while you have these characters who have the propensity to be fun, you're putting them in situations where, I mean, this is why they do, and it'll be interesting to see, because without spoiling too much, I think next week is a bit more of a knockabout episode. It's a bit more of a romp. I think
you're right, yes.
So it will be interesting to see how they pull that off and whether they can make that work, because I think this one is gearing you all the way through to thinking it's a bit of a mini Wrath of Khan. And not just because of Larn, but mini Wrath of Khan.
Wrath of Larn.
The Wrath of Larn, right?
Or the slightly sulky moping in the corner of Larn.
Yeah, that's more appropriate. But it doesn't do it. So I think it's just an interesting... It's an interesting approach, I guess, really, in that I'm not saying they should have done that, but I'm saying that the episode almost makes you want to feel that it's going to, which is slightly different.
I kind of agree with you in terms of, like, I think especially a show like Star Trek, like traditionally speaking, you know, from like the TOS days and through all the 90s and early noughties. It's very difficult because obviously that is episodic and it is, you know, company of characters. So killing off a main character is not within the DNA of those shows. Modern television is slightly different and things are being made in a slightly different way. But of course, this Strange New Worlds is trying to hark back. So it's a real difficult one, because I actually agree that I think sometimes early on, if you kill who appears to be a main character, it can have a lot of import. Obviously,
step into the world of power, loyalty, and luck.
I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse.
With family, cannolis, and spins mean everything.
Now, you wanna get mixed up in the family business.
Introducing The Godfather at ChumbaCasino.com. Test your luck in the shadowy world of The Godfather slot.
Someday, I will call upon you to do a service for me.
Play The Godfather, now at ChumbaCasino.com.
Welcome to the family.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from, with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
TNG did it with Tasha Yar, which was a sort of a coincidence, you know, like needs must kind of situation. Yeah. But it actually, I think, did a lot of good for the show. I think it really made you go, oh, this isn't like the old Star Trek where Scotty and McCoy are always safe. It's like, this is like, main character just died halfway through. How brutal. Then they never killed a main character ever again, but it doesn't matter because the point is made.
They did. And, they did in Nemesis 20 years later.
Oh, Nemesis. 20 years later, they killed one character who basically said, guys, I'm just getting too fat to play an android. Please, let me go. And they would just search for Spocking him. But it's, I agree. I think that had and you know what, Hemmer's a great character, so I'm glad that he didn't.
Me too.
Had he died, I think that would have made a real point. It would have done something. And the character of Tilly, I think if she had died, especially because she was I don't know to what level she's a fan favorite, but she's definitely, the writers like love her. If she had been killed, that would have had some significance to it, and it would have cemented something. So yeah, I agree. This show felt like someone was going to die, and it's difficult because we have got legacy characters. So, you know, there is a moment at the end where Hemmer and Uhura, you know, Pike thinks they're dead, and you're kind of like, well, Hemmer might be dead, but Uhura's fine.
It's funny you say
this. If Uhura's fine,
because you know, this is something was on my mind in this episode particularly, in that there are at least 4 or 5 characters in this show who, whenever they're in jeopardy, you're never really going. If you know TOS, you're never going to be in that moment with them because you know.
I had the same thing.
They're going to survive.
Exactly the same issue with like, and it wasn't so present in the first 3 episodes, but in this one where everyone's life is at risk, it's like, yeah, but you know, Chapel's fine, Una's fine. You know, Pike is basically fine. Uhura's fine. It's like Spock's fine. Even you know, Kirk Senior is fine.
Yeah,
it's like there are so many characters here who are. It's difficult to create genuine jeopardy, which I think is an issue that the show's going to have to work around somehow.
Well, I suppose you could use an analog of this, not at all science fiction. Is I suppose something like Better Call Saul, say, where you'll have you've got particularly two characters in that show who are in Breaking Bad further on, and frequently get themselves into, particularly one of the characters gets themselves into life or death scrapes, and you know they're going to survive because you know they do later on. So I suppose the way to think about it is, it's about appreciating the and this is what I was doing throughout this episode. I was thinking, right, I know they're going to be fine, so I've got to look at this in the sense of, what's the story doing, and is it thrilling me? Is it entertaining me? Is it funny? Is it well crafted? And I have to just put aside the fact that if they are trying to make us think that, you know, like in the last episode, Pike and Spock are on this planet and there's a big ion cloud or whatever coming to them and they might not beam off in time, they will, obviously, you know. Or in this one, Uhura's in that, in that cargo bay that's vented and she's almost being thrown out of it, and you think, no, she's going to be fine. Like, you have to sort of detach, I think. And it could be a bit of a problem in that sense. I mean, there are lots of people out there who just lap anything up. And I've really seen that lately. I tried to review Picard and I did a very, honest review that I thought was fairly balanced. And the amount of people who decided to tell me that I'm an idiot because I didn't love it, 10 out of 10, the best thing ever, is astonishing. It's some people will lap up anything and they...
Is that Brent Spider on Twitter?
Yeah. So there are some people who they won't care really. But I think if you're...
Yeah.
There are some people like us who maybe think, well, we have to then watch Strange New Worlds and not judge it in that way, I guess, and to try and think of it as, if these stories are putting these characters in peril, like Memento Mori does, are we enjoying the construction of this story? And what is it saying? And what are we getting out of it as a viewer? I suppose that's a good question. What do you think? Did you get much out of Memento Mori as a rounded episode of Star Trek in that way? If you detach from the crisis element and the jeopardy, was there a lot here for you to really that resonated with you on a character or a thematic level?
You see, that's the really good question. It's like listening to what you've just been saying. It's kind of like building me towards that. And the problem is, especially talking about this episode in particular, is that my short answer to that is not much. There wasn't much. But it sounds like this whole conversation. It probably sounds like I'm being quite negative about this show, which I'm honestly not. My mindset towards it is not a negative one. You know, I like it. I like what they're going for. I see the potential in this show to become much better than it is at the moment. But I think with this episode in particular, I think a lot of the flaws, and it is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. You know, it's like this scene at the end where Pike does think that Uhura and Hema are dead. That was a nothing. It didn't elicit anything emotionally from me. Even, you know, Anson Mount's brilliant, but even his performance, you know, it's a lovely moment where he thinks, oh, they're dead, and then he realizes they're okay and he's excited. But that wasn't enough for me, because I know they're okay.
Yeah. Or Uhura
with the stuff with Una,
anyway,
is great. I really like the fact that she's kind of like, there's that very stoic moment where someone else needs her plasma. She's like, give them the plasma.
That's great.
And it's like, that's a great moment. That's a really nice little Star Trek type moment. So that worked for me very much. But the peril that she was in didn't. And it's almost like, it's like Una doesn't know that she's safe, but I know that she's safe. So as much as it's a great Star Trek-y thing of her to be selfless, it's a bit like Superman stepping in front of a bullet. He usually knows he's going to be okay, so it's not that big a deal. So it was a real tear for me, and I think that the show, you know, previous episodes I've enjoyed the ride, as it were. You know, even knowing that, you know, we knew that Pike and Spock were going to be okay on that planet in that ion form, the storm. We knew they were going to be fine, but I enjoyed the sequence. I enjoyed what they were doing and what they were discovering down there. This episode, I think so many people were in so much peril, but I knew they were all going to be okay. I didn't quite get enough out of it. And as much as I do, like, I think Lan is a character I'm least interested in at the moment, outside of Ortegas, who they haven't really focused on yet. So as much as she annoys me, I'm not, you know, I'm leaving judgment for now. But Lan is a little bit boring, and so there was a lot of focus on her, and I was like, I don't care enough about you yet. So I think I wasn't, and I should point out, like, as with the whole cast, like Christina Chong, I think is great. I really like her. Seen her in plenty of things beforehand. I think the character and the characterization that she's presenting are really good. But I think that she and a lot of the elements of this episode in particular are just a little bit ordinary and pedestrian.
Well, I mean, there's a couple of points being made on our, you know, some of our chats we've had on the Discord and various things about how quite a lot of these characters seem to have tragic backstories, which is something that, you know, yes. Uhura's got one and Benga's got one. Well, I mean, that hopefully will be resolved one day, and that's quite...
Yes, I think that's going to be a happy...
Yeah, and it's quite a nice, sweet little idea, I think, you know, his daughter in the transporter beam. Yeah, that's quite nice, but it's quite a sad story. Yeah, it is cute. It's quite a sad story, and Lan obviously has this... The thing, I suppose, with this, I like Lan, I think, more because of Chong, and like you kind of said.
No, I really like her,
because I think she's doing a really good job, and I think Lan is a poison chalice of a character, frankly, because the moment everyone heard her name, I think half the franchise went, "What are you doing?" Because, I mean, I still find it hard. I mean, I'd like to think this was a conversation Spock had with Kirk off screen, but I still find it hard to believe that he didn't mention that he knew the descendant of this guy they've just thawed out, right, in Space Seed. So I'm hoping that was a conversation he happened to have, and we just didn't hear it on the episode. That he went,
Spock is such a sneaky bastard.
He just goes, he just said to Kirk, "Yeah, by the way, I know Khan's like descendant. Oh, by the way, I also have a sister I can't tell you about." You know, all this. He's just saying this off.
Don't even get me started on my brother. It's just like, seriously, Spock. It's like, even when Spock, first time Kirk ever meets Spock's parents, it's like they arrive on the ship and they're
Hey guys, it is Ryan. I'm not sure if you know this about me, but I'm a bit of a fun fanatic when I can. I like to work, but I like fun too. It's a thing. And now the truth is out there. I can tell you about my favorite place to have fun. Chumba Casino. They have hundreds of social casino style games to choose from with new games released each week. You can play for free anytime, anywhere. And each day brings a new chance to collect daily bonuses. So join me in the fun. Sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Chatting to Kirk, and then Kirk's like, anyway, Spock, do you want to go down to the planet and meet your parents?
Yeah.
And Spock's just like, oh, these are my parents. Yeah. It's like, Spock is not giving much away.
Well, actually, these shows, this and Discovery, make me really sad that Kirk didn't know so many really important things about his best mate. Like, I'm just like, poor Kirk. Like, he thought he knew Spock better than anyone, and vice versa. And he didn't know about Burnham, and he didn't know about La'an, and he didn't know all these things. And I'm like, or maybe he did, and we just didn't see that. Oh, well, obviously we didn't.
Spock, why are you keeping all these things from me?
Yeah,
I see. That's terrible.
That's pretty good.
Sounded more like drunk Christopher Walken.
That wasn't bad.
May I? Is this okay? Is this an appropriate point then for me to go off on one about Nurse Chapel?
Can I let me just finish about La'an, right? Because I just want to.
Of course,
in a sec. But I think the thing with La'an is that they have a character here who potentially has a really good story arc, I think, in that you've got somebody who is brittle and he's broken, and at the start of this episode she says, I'm not broken, I'm fine. And by the end of this episode, she's starting to, accept. She puts the badge back on as part of this Starfleet Remembrance Day thing that they do. And that to me is good storytelling. It's taking a character from one place to another and getting them to a point where they're starting to reach a bit of acceptance. But I don't necessarily think this episode tells us anything we didn't know already from dialogue that she told 2 episodes ago. I don't really think we saw her, weirdly grinning brother who just kept popping up, and freaking everyone out. And then, you saw a little bit more of the attack and this kind of thing. But it's very similar to Burnham's backstory, really. It's almost like copy paste, and it's like, well, there's nothing wrong with that backstory at all. And I like the idea that La'an is a way to amp up the Gorn as a menace. She's describing them as like an ancient terror, and they are hunters, and they're monsters. That's all good. That's all good because that's escalating the threat, of these unseen aliens off screen. There's nothing wrong with all of that, but I don't necessarily think this had any big, powerful revelations about La'an. Even though it takes her from one stage to another, I don't know if I really felt it, really. And I don't know if... I think there was too much else going on in this one to really give Lana due properly. I think they ought to have done maybe a story where it was a bit more laser-focused on Lana. Like last week was more laser-focused on Una, and I think that worked a bit better for her as a character than this did for... And the same for Uhura in Children of Comet. I think, they were a bit more focused, and I don't think this quite had that.
I'd agree with that. And I think part of that is the issue of making Star Trek today, which I think this show is taking on that challenge, head on. And I think it's so far making a valiant attempt at how to make modern Star Trek, or how to make Star Trek for a modern audience. But the problem they have, and one of the issues I think is that they're too focused on maybe with modern Star Trek, is about it being action and excitement. And this episode is definitely sort of like higher on the action levels. But there's so much desire for kind of like, space battles and explosions and all this kind of stuff, that what you actually needed was just a slow episode, which I think unfortunately this series will never do. This series will never have a, Data's Day. It will never have an episode like that. It will never have an episode which is basically just Spock and La'an hanging out, mind melding. That's not going to happen with Star Trek probably ever again. And that's one of the reasons why I'm still sort of fighting about liking this. I guess part of me is going to have to let go of what Star Trek used to be and appreciate that this is the best it will be going forward. And that doesn't make this a bad show. It's not a negative against the show, but I don't think they have I don't think they're brave enough to have an episode that would focus down on her character, literally just quietly, somberly, her interacting with people, it has to be to the backdrop of something exciting and something dangerous.
Yeah,
which I think is kind of the problem for Trek at the moment.
No, I would agree. I think they feel that television has moved on. I would disagree. I think there are lots of dramas now that, and you know, I do firmly believe that television is in a real golden age overall. I think there is some amazing drama, and you know, across different genres, and you absolutely can have an 8 or 10 part season where you have a really slow moving conceptual idea and a plot. You know, absolutely happens. You know, on some of the most prestige dramas that we have out there, you know, it literally can sometimes be people sitting in a room talking, and that is something that Star Trek used to do really well. You know, or put them on a situation talking. You know, look at something like Darmok. You know, I can't imagine you'd ever get a Darmok made in this kind of style.
No, I can't see that.
And Darmok is recognised as one of the great episodes of Star Trek because it just explores a concept, and it's unafraid to let actors act and let ideas bloom. And I think even the shows that I've been least enamoured of have these ideas in there, you know, often at points, but they never really are given the space to do enough with them. And I think Strange New Worlds won't be that show, but at the same time, I think what it is going to do better off the basis of these early episodes is potentially, because they're free of having to do a relentlessly repetitive serialized arc, that they can drill in a little bit more with character, maybe. And, you know, I think even though it will be festooned a bit more with action and suspense, yeah, I think they might be able to drill in a bit more than you and ultimately allow for an ensemble. And that's the key. I think this, because Picard's a slightly different entity, so I don't almost count that in the same way. But the ensemble already in Strange New Worlds is far more strong and far more fleshed out than previous Star Trek shows, even potentially Enterprise. Actually, I'm not just saying Discovery in that way. Even Enterprise, you know, I think this already has the potential to flesh people out a bit more. So I think it's a bit of a halfway house. I think you're right, but I do think this might be able to have, if they continue with, if they hold their nerve with standalone storytelling, and they don't eventually cave to the fear that it's not enough, and then they suddenly put them on a season-long adventure, at which point I'm just going to throw my TV out the fucking window, frankly. I really will. But if they hold their nerve and they keep this style going for 5 seasons or however long they're going to do this for, then I think we might find this is richer television, richer Star Trek, even though it's never going to be what the 90s was.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is possibly the best it's going to get in this current creative team. I do think there is potential for a new wave of Star Trek. I know it's very popular to kind of like criticize Alex Kurtzman, but I think that he is not a good driving force behind it. But his contract will be up in a few years, and I imagine that if the right person comes in, then there could be a new golden age of Star Trek. I'm not convinced that this show is going to usher that in, but I think that this show has the potential to be the crowning achievement of this current generation of Star Trek. I think that's where it kind of sits for me. And, you know, I enjoy Picard a lot more than you do. I probably despise Discovery more than you do. And the animated shows, they kind of sit there and they're sort of fun in their own thing. And, you know, we probably hold on to them a little bit more dearly than they deserve because they remind us of the good old days. But I'm hopeful for this show. But there are flaws in it which I'm not convinced it's going to jettison. I think it still has to win me over.
Yeah. And it's got time. It sounds like Chapel's doing that, though. You were going to make a point about Chapel.
Oh yes, well, it's what we were saying about. What you were saying about how everybody has a little bit of a sad backstory. So far, Chapel seems to not. Like, and we haven't learned a lot about her yet, and I'm sure we're going to in the next couple of episodes. But so far, she is a fairly positive, upbeat character. And there's no sense that she has some horrible backstory, which is probably going to, like, episode 5 is probably just going to be horrible backstory.
You've jinxed it now.
You know, okay, fuck it.
She's probably dying. She's probably got... yeah, she's probably got a long...
She's dying. She's going to, you know... Oh, good grief. Yeah. But I like, cards on the table, as a kid watching the original Star Trek... I had a massive crush on Nurse Chapel.
Yeah.
Like, I was in love with Nurse Chapel. Yeah. But I also, because even as a little kid, I was sort of very sort of like, I loved the sort of the tragic romance of it. I loved the fact that she was in love with Spock.
Yeah, yeah.
But he could never love her back. That was something that I found sort of, as a little kid, I found that achingly beautiful. It was like really. So I've kind of like come to this show with a kind of a 40-year-old built-in crush on the character of Nurse Chapel, and I'm really excited to see them do some kind of romantic, unrequited, whatever thing they go for with her and Spock. I'm really excited about seeing that explored, because she was a character that was, underutilized in the original series, but there was enough there for me to be interested. And I sort of hate myself for it, but like instantly I was kind of like, the character came in. I think Jess Bush, I think is great. I think the whole cast are good, but I think she's really great. She's sort of energetic and charming, and instantly I was kind of like, oh yeah, my Nurse Chapel crush is like right back. It's right back there. But I also think that there's a little bit of perfecting the formula in her, because, and I've kind of waffled about this on some other podcasts, but not to spend too much time on the character of Tilly. But I think one of the things they're trying to do with her character, and one of the reasons it annoys me so much, is that I think they were trying too hard to push this idea of the adorkable, quirky character. Like, there are lots of other elements to her character that I sort of, that frustrated me. But a big one was the writers seemed sort of like really in love with this idea of the adorkable Tilly. And then along comes Picard, and you get Jurati. And especially in the second season, I think Jurati has a similar thread. I think is a better written, possibly better performed character.
Definitely.
And is a more likeable character, because I think both Tilly and Jurati, they have likeable actresses. But I think with Jurati, they kind of perfected it a little bit better. But you can still tell that the writers are in love with this adorkable, quirky Jurati character. Now, along comes Chapel, and I feel like it's the same thing. I feel like they're trying to present us, because she sort of speaks without thinking, and she's a bit cool and a bit sassy, but is very clever and a bit quirky. But I feel like it works a bit better here. I feel like they've maybe focused that down. But I resent the previous two characters of Jurati and Tilly so much for forcing it that I'm now annoyed that I like those signs in this character. So I hate myself. It's like as if I'd suddenly become a Wesley Crusher fan.
Oh God!
It's like, no.
Well, it's in vogue. It's in vogue right now to be a Wesley Crusher fan. Let's face it.
Fuck Wesley Crusher.
Shut up, Wesley. But no, it's a good point. I think there is the danger of those characters sort of taking hold, and I think that has happened before. I think there is already hints about Chapel liking Spock. There's been a couple of moments where she sort of flirted a little bit with him, which is nice, and I clocked that. I think that might have happened in the last episode, and I clocked that. I was like, oh, good.
I think it was, yeah. I was like, nice, it.
And he has no idea, and she's blatantly doing a little bit of flirting with him. So it's...
Oh my God, stop it. I'm getting all excited already. It's like I was shipping these characters before shipping was a thing. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah, before shipping was a thing. So
I'm in love with them so much.
But it's, there are, and that's the thing. I do think, these episodes so far are evidence that the writers here do have a real fondness for that era, and they do, I think, and this is, I've not always been convinced that some of the writers truly respect Star Trek in the way that I'd like them to. But I think so far here, they've not done a bad job with that. And I think something like Memento Mori, which is an episode that's all about facing the the jaws of death. It really is that first sort of jaws of death episode, where Pike literally has to steer the Enterprise into a black hole, skirt the edge of a black hole and take a real chance that this could be it. And we've talked about the factor of jeopardy and the fact we know it's not going to be it, but it's the whole point, I suppose. It's about the metal aspect. It's testing the metal. It's throwing them into that situation. And I think in that sense, it's a good episode for that. And I think it respects the lore behind it and some of the interactions. And I did find a lot of that fun in this episode. I enjoyed a little bit more of that techno-babbly science going on. I enjoyed a little bit more about just seeing a crew on a ship, having to just work out these problems, and that's something that I felt like we haven't had in the same way, because it's so, the other two series are so dialed in to the emotional, heavy lifting of these quite, hard work, kind of levered emotional storylines that it's become exhausting. So it's quite nice to see an episode which is, and a TV show which is, as we've said, geared in a little bit of sadness, but see them actually in a situation where they're literally going into the jaws of death and they've just got to get out of there, and I like that about this episode. And even though it does have maybe a little bit more going on, and like you said, is a variant level of components from different parts of Star Trek wedged together, I think it shows that so far they've worked hard to try and make each episode relatively distinct from each other in terms of what it's tried to do. And I think that's great. I think that's really good that they're trying to mine different styles of different kinds of stories, different kind of approaches, so it's not going to become stale every week, which is definitely something that's happened in the other two shows. In their most recent seasons, there literally have been episodes where I've thought, what's the point of this? What is the point of this episode? Whereas I haven't felt that once yet with Strange New Worlds, and that's great. That is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of the issue of having standalone episodes or ongoing episodes, is that you feel it if there's a dud episode. It's like I generally speaking, I kind of, we've said I enjoyed Picard more than you did, more than a lot of people do. But the reality there is that there were some really dud episodes, but there were a couple of good episodes. But you've only got 10 episodes telling one story. So a dud episode stands out and you can't skip it. It's like if you're doing a TNG rewatch, you can skip Sub Rosa. You don't have to sit through that. You don't have to watch Beverly ghost fucking. You can say this is a bad episode. Let's not watch it. Whereas when you've got an ongoing storyline, or the same way they do with Discovery, I know they've tried to be more episodic, but it's not really. You're kind of stuck, and the bad episodes they kind of permeate and poison the good episodes. And especially when you've only got 10 or a dozen so episodes, you really, really feel that. And so yeah, something like Picard, it's very easy to say it's not a great series overall because it's got 3 shitty episodes. You go, well, it's got 2 great ones here and 1 great one there, but it doesn't matter because it's got the 3 shitty ones. Whereas with this series, if at the end of these 10 episodes I look back and I say, oh, well, you know what, this was the worst episode. It was, they stretched themselves too thin and they didn't focus enough and it was too many callbacks. It doesn't matter because the episode before and after are completely different in their own stories. So I think I'm hoping that they'll learn that. It's so bizarre, isn't it, to kind of want them to return to this kind of like former style of storytelling. But I think Star Trek needs that. It's what suits Star Trek. And I agree with you. I had a lot of fun watching this. I've had fun watching the other episodes. For me personally, I'm still not having enough fun or the level of fun that I want to have. But as you say, I think the next episode, I think it looks like they're going a bit more kind of like full on. It's a comedy episode. They used to do it in TOS. They do it in TNG. Every half a dozen episodes, you have a funny one.
Yeah.
You have Cupid. You have those kind of episodes. And I think I'm kind of focusing on Chapel quite a lot because she is so far unhindered by drama and backstory and misery. She's fun. She's 100% fun. And I feel like I can see that in the other characters. I can see the potential for that. But so far, because we're only a few episodes in, so Una Una has been, she's had her episode. Now she's had that, she can be a bit more fun. Pike, he's addressed his issue, so hopefully he can be a bit more fun. And I suspect this is one of those shows where the second season is going to be where it really pops.
Yeah, I think maybe. Yeah.
That was sort of it. Oh, well, I've got sort of a summing up of my vibe from it. A big thing that I took away from this episode, I guess, if I was going to sort of sum up slightly where I'm feeling about the show, but also the episode. And I appreciate that we've talked a lot about the show as a whole, rather than focusing on this one episode, which I guess, it's still early days. There's only a few episodes and we're still excited about having new Star Trek. But the big takeaway from this for me, I love the fact that Pike does some speeches in this. He has a couple of little speeches, and then he has some big speeches. But what I really noticed, and I kind of felt this in the first couple of episodes as well, this show actually feels to me more like Enterprise than Next Generation. And then that's not a bad thing. I kind of liked Enterprise. And I suppose if you're looking at like a through line, it kind of, like the timeline of things, it kind of works, I suppose. But this feels a lot more like Enterprise than Next Generation or even TOS. And then in this episode, Pike has a big sort of speech when he's sort of telling everyone what he's going to do. And I love the idea of the Remembrance Day that they have in this. That's a really nice idea. And he kind of clocks this in his speech. But I realised that this show, the character of Pike, and probably the vibe of this show going forward, is that these are hero speeches. They're not humanity speeches. Whereas Picard, we think of Picard as someone who gives speeches, but his speeches are very personal, and they're about humanity, and they're about goodness, and they're about striving to do what is right and correct. And they're not in themselves heroic. They're not him standing on the bridge of the Enterprise spurring people on to sacrifice themselves. It's him almost in rooms telling people that they have to be good, that they have to make the right choices. And I think that's the big difference in approach and attitude. This is a show with hero speeches, whereas TNG was a show with humanitarian speeches. And I think that's probably where I'm going to have to sort of like realize that we're never going to have a show. We're never going to have a Star Trek show that has a British actor quoting Shakespeare to convince people to do the right thing. We're going to have a Star Trek show where an American actor stands on the bridge of an exploding ship and tells everybody to hold on to their butts. Yeah. It's like that's the difference.
Yeah.
And it's not a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing. It's just kind of where we are now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's changed, it's evolved, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. Absolutely. And we're heading towards the midpoint of the season, where we've got the back half of the season to come. We've got season 2 to come as well. So I think it will be very interesting to look back and sum the season up generally and see which of these episodes have really, stood out, I suppose. But no, Memento Mori was a decent one. It was pretty good. Yeah, it was pretty good. I think it was... it did blend a lot of things together, but it had some good moments. It had some interesting character development for La'an. It had some funny scenes. It had some cool, CGI, some decent action beats in there as well. It sets the Gorn up as an interesting threat to come. So there's some good stuff. There's some good stuff here, even if the show hasn't yet had that episode where you go, oh, that's fantastic. It hasn't quite had that one yet, and the pilot was very good, and it was one of the better Star Trek pilots, I would say. But it's not that episode, so we'll see if that. Hopefully, that will come in season 1, but time will tell, I suppose. And hopefully, Rob, you'll be back to talk a season 2 episode with us. You'll obviously be watching season 1, and then when we come back and cover season 2, hopefully you'll join us again. And we might be
unless I absolutely fucking hate it, buddy.
Yeah, then maybe
the next couple of episodes, I'm just like, no, you know what?
If we don't hear from you again,
Discovery all over again.
If we don't hear from you again, we know how you feel about it.
I'm just in the garden burning the voyage home. Give me a minute. No, I'd love to come back. I really want. I've spent this entire conversation trying to figure out how to work in Gorn but not forgotten. But I can't, so I just throw it in at the end there with no context.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. Maybe we'll try and edit it to make sense somewhere.
Yeah. A little bit like season 2 of Picard. Then.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Rob. It's been great. It's been great fun to chew this one over with you and the show in general. So it's been fab. But until you do beam back onto the Enterprise for another tour of duty next season, where can people find you if they want to listen to a bit more of what you're up to?
Well, the best place to find me initially always is Twitter. I'm Forducks, which is FORDUCKS. Whatever I'm doing, I promote it, I retweet it, I stick it out there. But generally speaking, if you have a look at the We Made This website, have a look at what's going on there, and I usually pop up on various things. I am going to be, hopefully, heavily involved in some Hulk talk coming up. There's quite a few Hulk things going on, and I'm a massive Hulk fan. He's my third favourite superhero. So I'll be talking about that shortly for the network. And generally speaking, we have You Have Been Watching British Sitcom podcast. We should get a few more episodes of that up shortly, which I'm very excited about. Just keep your ear to the ground and listen to the rumblings. I'm around. I'm about.
Yeah, you're a man about town. Yeah. We will get a comedy podcast back on the road fairly soon. We've been busy with lots of other things this year, so we haven't produced a massive amount. But You Have Been Watching, that's called. So you check that out on We Made This, because we've had some really great discussions, and we'll have more to come. So you can find me as well, mainly on Twitter. That's my main home, at AJ Black Writer, and my website, culturalconversation.co.uk, where you'll find links to my various books and blogs and podcasts and things like that. And keep an eye on that for news about my own Star Trek book, which is being written for next year, which is called Lost Federations, and it's going to be about the unmade Star Trek projects, all the things that almost happened but never did. So that's going to be my second Star Trek book coming next year. But you'll hear much more about that on We Made This, because I will flog it like a shameless shill as much as I possibly can. So you all buy it. You can find me there, and generally on the We Made This podcast network, which is at W Made This and WeMadeThisNetwork.com, where you'll find all the other podcasts, including our other Star Trek shows. Make It So, a Star Trek Picard podcast, and Rarely Going, a animated Star Trek podcast. So you'll find a lot of what else we're doing on there. But thanks for joining us for another episode. Please subscribe to We Are Starfleet on Apple Podcasts. If you can give us a rating and review, ideally 5 stars, that'd be brilliant on Apple Podcasts. That'd help us a bunch. So please do consider helping us there. Follow us on Twitter at Starfleet Pod. And please do interact with us. That'd be fantastic. And if you do fancy supporting the Star Trek podcast and We Made This generally, please support us on Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/We Made This, throw us a couple of quid, because it'll help us keep producing all this stuff. Not that we use money in the Star Trek universe, but every little helps. Bit of latinum here and there doesn't go amiss. But Strange New Worlds is not all we're discussing on the network, so we'll give you a little taste of what you might have missed in just a minute. But until next time, hit it.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast.
This was one you requested, Matt. Was there any particular reason?
Part of it is because it meant that I got to get onto Out of Time.
Oh, okay, so that was the reason, right.
Yeah, no, ask me that question again when we do episode 2 of season 10.
I think I know what you're talking about on that particular episode that you might want to be on.
Oh, episode 1, yeah.
Yes.
But also, I think I'm quite a big Rimmer fan, and I always find Rimmer-centric episodes interesting, dependent on their quality. And this and the next episode, and I don't really want to go into something that is more relevant for next episode.
Free with this month's issue.
Talking about double bass, did you ever play double bass?
No, I have touched a double bass, but I've never actually played it. I'll stick with a 5-string Warwick, and I'll be all right.
The only time I've ever played one was the short period I was at university. They've got one in the music room there, and I used to play it on its side like a normal bass. Although I'm nowhere near as big as Pete Steele from Typo Negative, so it was even more ridiculous when I did it than when he does it.
Anniversaries podcast.
Yeah, I like, A New Hope. I like Strikes Back. I like The Last Jedi. I think Revenge of the Sith is pretty good. But, Rise of Skywalker can just...
Rise of Skywalker is terrible.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
You know what I mean?
On our podcast, we're big fans of The Last Jedi, and we do not like Rise of Skywalker at all.
Oh, maybe I'll fit right in then.
Maybe you'll fit right in.
But yeah, I can offer maybe a controversial take. For example, I think The Return of the Jedi is not good.
Get out. Get out.
Hey, man, this is my podcast. You get out.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.